When we picture the London Blitz, a pretty specific image usually comes to mind, right? We see Londoners all united, resilient, just carrying on with that classic stiff upper lip as bombs are falling all around them. But what if that powerful story, that image of national unity, what if it isn't the whole picture? Let's dig into the more complicated and often hidden reality behind the myth of the Blitz Spirit. This quote from an American witness at the time, it just nails the popular image of the Blitz Spirit, doesn't it? It's this heroic narrative of a British people standing defiant, totally unified against the Nazi bombing campaign. This was the image that was projected to the entire world, and wow, it's one that has really, really stuck around for decades.
And yeah, that's the big question. There's absolutely no denying the incredible bravery and resilience of so many people. But was that spirit of unity really universal? Or did it actually mask some pretty deep-seated social tensions that were still bubbling away, even under the most intense bombardment imaginable?
Well, there's actually a name for this idea. The historian Angus Calder, he called it the myth of the Blitz. Now, to be clear, he wasn't saying the bravery was a lie. Not at all. He was arguing that the popular memory, this idea of a perfectly unified nation, was, well, a constructed narrative. It was a story that kind of smoothed over some very real social fractures and prejudice. And it was a super useful narrative, right? Great for wartime morale and for building a national identity after the war, which helps explain why it's remained so powerful.
But before we can really dig into those social fractures, we first have to get a handle on the sheer scale of the pressure people were under. So let's just take a step back and ask, what was the Blitz, really?
Well, the main campaign was this relentless 8-month-long assault. It kicked off in September 1940, and London was bombed for 56 out of 57 nights in a row. Just try to imagine that. The German Luftwaffe pretty quickly switched to night raids to try and avoid the RAF, and from there, the bombing spread all across the country, hammering other vital cities before the main campaign finally wound down in May of 41. And it really wasn't just London. Sure, the capital took the absolute brunt of it, over 18,000 tons of bombs dropped in major raids alone, but other cities were just devastated. Ports like Liverpool and Plymouth, industrial hubs like Birmingham and Coventry, they were hammered too. This was truly a nationwide ordeal. And the human cost, well, it's just staggering. Around 40,000 civilians were killed. That one number, it represents such an immense loss of life. A tragedy on a scale that's honestly hard to wrap your head around. And that's the backdrop for everything else we're about to talk about. So with all that shared trauma, all that destruction, you would expect a nation to just pull together. And look, in so many ways it did. But as we're about to see, that immense pressure also exposed, and in some cases even worsened, the deep divisions that were already there. Let's take a look at the cracks in that facade of unity. Okay, so one of the ways a national identity gets reinforced is by creating an other, an us versus them. During the 1940s, you saw these really negative stereotypes being applied to minority groups, and particularly to Jewish people. They were often framed as being selfish, cowardly, and lacking that famous stoicism. The exact opposite of the ideal British values of self-sacrifice and community spirit. It was a way of saying, this is who we are, by pointing to who they are not. And this kind of stereotyping, it had devastating real-world consequences. The Bethnal Green disaster is a just horrifying example. A test air raid siren goes off, and people, of course, rush for shelter in the local tube station. But someone slips on the wet stairs. In the darkness, in the confusion, a catastrophic crush happens. 173 people, mostly women and children, die. And almost right away, a vicious rumor started to spread to explain why it happened. That rumor, which was completely fueled by anti-Semitic stereotypes, was that Jewish people had caused the panic by selfishly pushing their way into the shelter first. There was absolutely no truth to it, but it tapped directly into those prejudiced ideas we just talked about of cowardice and selfishness. And here is the absolute kicker. The government knew the rumor was false. An official inquiry found no evidence whatever to back it up. But because of wartime censorship, they kept the reports secret until after the war was over. And that decision meant that the lie was allowed to fester for years, cementing prejudice and causing just immense pain to a community that was already grieving. You know, the Jewish community wasn't the only group facing a battle at home while the nation was at war abroad. Black Britons were also fighting a war on two fronts, one against the Axis powers and a whole other one against discrimination, right here in Britain. Just take the story of Amelia King. She was a Black Briton who just wanted to do her bit for the war effort. She tried to join the Women's Land Army, and she was denied entry for no other reason than the color of her skin. But she fought back, and her case actually made it all the way to the House of Commons. It sparked this huge national debate with tons of people pointing out the glaring hypocrisy of fighting the racist ideology of Nazism overseas while tolerating racism at home. Or consider Fernando Henriquez. He'd moved to London from Jamaica as a kid. When the war started, he tried to join the Royal Air Force but was rejected because of the government's official color bar, a policy that actually restricted non-white people from enlisting. But he was undeterred. He went and joined the Auxiliary Fire Service and put his life on the line fighting the fires of the Blitz right there in London. I mean, these stories show that this wasn't just casual prejudice. It was often official, top-down policies straight from the government. So when you start putting all these different pieces together, the sheer scale of the bombing, the powerful narrative of unity, and these stories of division and discrimination, you get a much richer, much more complicated, and frankly, a much more human story of the Blitz. And this is why it all matters so much. This quote really gets to the heart of it. By just holding on to that simple, heroic myth of the Blitz, we risk burying the stories of people like Amelia King, Fernando Henriquez, and the victims of the Bethnal Green disaster. We just don't do justice to their experiences, their struggles, or their contributions. So the point here isn't that the famous Blitz Spirit was some kind of lie, not at all. The resilience was real, the bravery was absolutely real. But that story of total, seamless unity, it was incomplete. It was a narrative that was built, at least in part, by ignoring some really uncomfortable truths and by excluding the stories of those on the margins. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The Blitz is just one example. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories, what other voices get left buried in the rubble of our most cherished national myths?